Hello and welcome to Web API implementation lesson. In this video we are going to take a look at data interfaces, repositories, dependency injection preferences configuration, and Web API configuration. The first thing you have to do when you are going to create Web API for Magento 2 is API interfaces, and such interfaces are usually located under API directory within your model. The first interface we'll create is data interface for the item, and data interface will be stored under data namespace, and here we are going to create our item interface. Our item entity contains just two fields, name and description. So let's implement getters for those fields. It's public function getName and public function getDescription. For work of Magento Web API framework, we have to provide an annotation for return of those methods. So both name and description are strings. That's why we are setting return annotation to string type. The same for description. However, description is optional for our item, so it can return null. That I'm going to specify in return annotation. Now let's create a repository interface. We'll create it under API directory and call it item repository interface. Item repository interface is an interface that will provide us access to all items. It will have just one method called getList. And as for item interface, it has specify an annotation for return. In our case, item repository interface will return array of item interfaces. So let's set it to mastering, sample module, API, data, item interface, and array. Now let's implement the repository based on interface. I'll create it in the model folder and call it item repository. The class item repository implements item repository interface just created by us. To get the list of items and return it, the item repository has to work with collection. That's why we have to include collection factory to our constructor as a dependency. So we are creating constructor, specifying collection factory, we have to create a property where this collection factory will be stored. This property is also called collection factory, and let's assign the collection factory provided by dependency injection to this property. Now let's implement the function from interface. the function getList. We can do it in one line by accessing collection factory, creating new collection, and getting all items of this collection. That's it. Now we have to map interfaces to classes, and this can be done in DI configuration. So we would like to create some preferences. Preference is a kind of DI configuration that is mapping interface to its type. So, for example, if I will create a preference for item interface and specify a type as item, then each time item interface will be requested, an instance of item will be returned. So, first preference for the item. Mastering, sample module, API, data, item interface, and the type is mastering sample module, model, item. The second preference will be for item repository interface. So item repository interface is located under mastering, sample model, API, item repository interface. And the type is mastering, sample model, model, item repository. Okay, I have to add arguments that was deleted by mistake from me. Now, let's create web API configuration. Web API configuration should be created under etc directory, and it's called web API.xml. The root node of this configuration is called config. Sorry, it's called routes. And let's add an XML declaration to the top. Version 1.0. Inside the routes node, we can create our route with URL, and our URL will be version 1 and just mastering. Method get. You can create the web API for any HTTP method. And let's define a service. The class of the service will be our repository, and if to be specific, repository interface. So it's mastering, sample module, API, item repository interface. and the method will be getList. We have to specify ACL resources for this call. So resources resource and ref property. Here you can specify the ACL resource. We can use the ACL resource we created before for our model. However, I would like to skip authorization in this video just to save time and create this web API under anonymous resource. So it will require no authorization. That's it. Let's flush cache. So bin Magento cache flush and test our implementation. So created web API will be available both on SOAP and REST. However, I would like to use just a browser to test it, and the correct path is REST and then our path specified in web API configuration, and it is version 1 mastering. As you can see, we have an XML response with all our items. That's it. In this section, we created Magento command line command, configured scheduled tasks, created menu entry, created ACL resource, and implemented web API. That's a great job. The next section is UI components library. See you!